Welcome to the Geekcentric podcast, and welcome to our spoiler-free review for Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey. I remember a wife, a son, home. Hello, I'm J-Law, but you can call me Justin. And if you're joining us for the first time, well, we are Geekcentric, a podcast covering the world of movies, TV shows, gaming, and all things Geekcentric. And today we're diving into Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey. A huge thank you to Universal Pictures Canada for inviting us out to see the film early for review. Now, I can't do this alone. Today I am joined by my fellow warriors, Spartans, maybe. I'm not sure what the term is, but Nate Shelton, Darcy Hudson. How you both doing today?
Doing good.
I don't think would we be Spartans, Darcy? I don't know if.
I mean, Spartans are just warriors from Sparta. It's not like they're a specific.
Would I be forced into war at my age?
No, you'd be. What's that? What was the sheep boy? The
shepherd's boy?
The shepherd's boy, for sure. You'd have the tall socks and the shorts.
I might be forced to go on the adventure, but I definitely am not signing up.
I mean, at this point, I'm not sure if you've passed. I mean, you probably would have already been fighting by this point if we were back.
Yeah, that's
then.
true. Maybe I tricked somebody to take my place. The honorable thing, as we get to see in this movie.
Yes, as we do. Well, look, I'm excited to talk to you guys about this movie. I've been sitting with it. We saw it yesterday, and I'm excited to get into it. But before we jump into the movie itself, I did want to ask you something both. This feels like one of those movies that has had people talking about it for quite some time, well over a year. Every casting announcement became news. Every behind-the-scene photo, the fact that it's shot entirely on IMAX, and even the lead up to us going to see this movie, people were seeing it, they were buzzing about it, the social embargoes lifted. So, I'm gonna go back to our grassroots from the Geekcentric channel, and I'm gonna ask you guys, what was your hype level going into this movie? With all the influences around it, where were you sitting with it? Darcy, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't really following much of the online hype. I mean, I don't really do that for any movie or show. I tend to wait for the stuff to come out before I start talking about it or getting hyped for it. But this one, when the trailer we saw that trailer again over a year and a half ago. Whenever we got that teaser at first, it was incredible, and I remember getting excited because I am a huge fan of the Odyssey and Iliad and just like all the mythos behind Greek mythology and any mythology for that matter. So I was pretty stoked on that regard to see the Odyssey told at this grand of scale. So yeah, I'd say I was probably pretty hyped coming into this because it is such a cool story.
Neat.
Yeah, I think these movies are such a they're such a big deal, right? Like these tickets were on sale like a year before the movie was in theaters, and that's a very long time. And I think, going back to some of the earliest days of the Geekcentric podcast, we did our Christopher Nolan, filmography watch, I think leading up to Tenet, if I'm not mistaken. And so, yeah, I mean, I like the majority of Christopher Nolan's movies. So I was pretty excited. And like you said, all the hype online, everybody talking about it, and of course seeing it, them all talking about seeing it in IMAX and what have you, gets you to a certain place where, yeah, I was pretty excited. I think I was probably about a 7 or an 8 going into this, if we're on the 10-point classic up to the hype scale from those videos.
Yeah, absolutely. How about, I know you said your hype was pretty up there. What would you range it, Darcy?
Yeah, probably around like a 7 or 8 myself. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah. Okay. Well, I think we were all pretty much on the same hype level. I am a huge Nolan fan. I think some would call me a Nolan bro. I don't think I would call myself a Nolan bro. I love his movies. He was sort of one of the filmmakers that was kind of the gateway into understanding, the medium is so much more than just, linear storytelling or just conventional filmmaking. He was doing things differently and telling his stories in a very unique way. And he's continued to do that through and through. Have his movies all been perfect? No. I think, every one of his films though speak to where he was at in his development as a filmmaker, and I think they represent sort of, his mindset at that time. And I think that they, they're like little capsules of where he was. So I'm always excited to see a Nolan movie, because that means you get to see the next evolution of this filmmaker. So going from something like Oppenheimer into the Odyssey, yeah, I was excited. I think I was more excited, obviously, just for the idea of the IMAX of it all. The first film to be shot in IMAX 70 mil, which is a true 4:3, or 1:3 ratio, which is just going to be a giant square essentially, and filling the entire screen. Because there were moments I remember, even in Dark Knight or even in Interstellar, just being like, why do we need to go back to those different aspect ratios? Why don't we just have an entire film that is just IMAX? And here we are with the Odyssey. So yeah, I think, I was at a hype level of about an 8, really, because I think the real thing that was kind of like left up in the air for me was just how was the story going to work. But yeah, let's talk about it. I want us to remember this, just because, like, it sometimes is a reality where the expectations that we have can sometimes become part of that experience and affect our experience in some ways. So let's just remember where we were sitting, and then we'll come back as we give our final scores and see, did it match. But let's get to the synopsis for this film. Christopher Nolan's next film, The Odyssey, is a mythic action epic shot across the world using brand new IMAX film technology. The film brings Homer's foundational saga to IMAX film screens for the first time ever. Directed by Christopher Nolan and produced by Christopher Nolan and Emma Thomas. The film stars Matt Damon, Tom Holland, Anne Hathaway, Robert Pattinson, Lupita Nyong'o, Zendaya, Charlize Theron, John Barenthal, Benny Safdie, John Leguizamo, Elliot Page, Hamish Patel, Bill Irwin, Samantha Morton, Corey Hawkins, Mia Goth, and Travis Scott. The Odyssey is in theaters and in IMAX theaters on July 17th, 2026. That's this Friday. So this episode is labeled spoiler free, but it's pretty hard to spoil a story that's 3,000 years old. So we've all made the agreement to not spoil anything that might have been adapted or changed from the original. Darcy's the only person that really would actually know any of that. So for us, we're just going to kind of stick to, some of the characters, some of the beats of what the story is. Now, I will preface that we did not see this movie in IMAX 70 mil. We saw it in 70 mil, which is great. It's still great. It's not necessarily the full 1:3 aspect ratio. It's not that towering image, but the clarity was there. We're going to talk about it as we get into look and feel, and that's exactly where we're going to start. Look and feel. I want to throw it to Darcy. We're talking about this film and just its sort of aura of its look and the sound and everything that kind of comes together to bring this Homer's Odyssey to life. What stood out to you the most?
Again, definitely the look and the way it was captured and the scale they were bringing it to life. Despite not getting that IMAX, you could still feel at times the size and the scope of this epic they were telling. And I think that's where this movie is at its strongest, is the way it looks. Again, Nolan is the best at is so good at shooting shots and setting up scenes to really tell a story and make dynamic use of the screen, basically. And this is it's no different. Again, it's him at his best, so he's really perfected what he's done. So it just makes sense. The look works. Where the sound design, Ludwig Göransson also marries it perfectly. It has that epic feel to it, where it's the scale of the battles and just the mythos that you're exploring is brought to life with this guttural and at times chaotic soundtrack that really matches the storytelling.
Absolutely. I think, the easiest place to start is just saying that this might be the best looking Christopher Nolan film ever made. I think that's safe to say. I think every frame just feels so immersive and massive, and never because of like the need of visual effects. It just comes down from this idea of locations, great production design, and of course Hoyte van Hoytema's cinematography, and having this keen eye and collaborating with Christopher Nolan to bring this aesthetic to life. There's just a level of authenticity here that it just immediately pulls you into the world because it is just so real.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you really feel that in the on the water moments as well, especially, right? Like with I think the massive practical boats, the shots of those boats, whether it's a huge storm or whether it's like a beautiful sunset, like these scenes look so huge and really inviting, and kind of, you kind of get sucked into them. And I think the way they pulled off that giant, there's a, you've seen it in the trailer, the giant cyclops. I cannot wait to see how that's done practically. And I think overall there's just so many memorable visuals in this movie that will stick with me as I go through Nolan's catalog in the future. Like, we like to rewatch these movies. There were a lot of moments. I do think the movie does get a little bit dark at times. I think the natural lighting is one of those things that does feel like a bit of a hit or miss throughout the film, and can either really add to a scene or can take away from sequences, especially when it comes to things like action. I think it can feel a little bit messy, a little bit fuzzy and blurry, and I don't know, maybe that was the screen we were watching it on. But I think with how brutal the action could have been if it was a little more focused, I don't know if he quite reached that, in terms of capturing that action. But I think the slower moments, where even if that action is going on, the moments where we're hyper focused on a specific character in a shot, that's where we get some of the best shots in this entire film, right?
Mhm.
Some of the best moments where we can actually see these actors' faces and the way that they're reacting to the things that are going on around them, which are incredible from a visual standpoint as well. But I think the way that it's captured is better when the camera is slowed down versus when it's sped up.
Sure. Yeah. I feel like, it's not a camera that they were easily able to run and gun. So most of the shots were fairly static, but to your point, like using the idea of like natural light, not necessarily overlighting in an unnatural way, leaves moments to feel darker and in a more natural way. And you're, using fires and other things to kind of create like this ambient light for these moments. I don't know if this movie was necessarily like, there's obviously action in it, but I don't know if the movie was about the action, or, which is why it wasn't really a focus as much. But Nolan has never really been good at, like, he's been good at setting action set pieces, but the editing of action always feels very jarbled and like hard to like find your anchor. Like, I just think of the third act of The Dark Knight Rises, when we're getting into this climactic fight, and we anchor it with like that fight with Bane, and then suddenly we're just shifting around to all of these different places, and it's harder to keep a focus on what's going on. That could be said about some of the action moments here in this film. But I think you're right. Like those dark moments, I think, are purposely meant to be dark because it's supposed to feel very natural and real to what that environment would have been like in 3,000 years ago. But I think what really impressed me the most about this film is just, again, Nolan's commitment to just shooting as much of it as possible as for it to be real. Whether it's the ships, like you said, the landscapes, or the lighting, the scale of the action varies. You can feel that this was done with intention to bring audiences in, right? And I think nothing ever felt manufactured. I think the practical filmmaking very much elevated this ancient world and gave it a sense of weight that makes the mythology feel more believable in a lot of ways, rather than trying to lean into like doing a CGI Cyclops. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, I think, casting Bill Irwin to do that, and how they built it. Again, a lot of the secrets haven't been revealed, unless they have been. I just haven't done enough research, but there's still more to be revealed about behind the scenes, about how a lot of this was put together. I know Tom Holland had talked about how he was on set for the day that they did the big giants battle in the forest.
Mhm.
And they were just men fighting. And then what he saw was like giants fighting smaller men. And he was like, how the hell did they do that? So it'll be interesting to see how, because I think the best visual effects are the ones that are actually hidden in plain sight. and that are done properly, and it's like, oh, that don't take you out. So I think that there's a lot of that. So I don't know. I love the fact that this film just never loses sight of that and the beauty of the world around them. There are so many moments where I found myself just appreciating the composition of the shot, the lighting of the shot, the textures in the shot. It's one of those films that constantly reminds you why people still shoot on film, because of the personality and the texture and the vibe that it gives. I know that's a buzzy word, but the vibe that it's getting, it's like, and just like seeing something like that on a screen, especially if it's an IMAX screen. Like, again, we haven't seen an IMAX, but like, I can't wait to see this movie in IMAX now. Like, I'm stoked to see it. But yeah, I think that from a visual standpoint, this is the best looking Nolan film, and any format you see it in, I think it's going to be the best. But you mentioned Ludwig, Darcy, and Nate, I know you're going to want to get in there on that. I think Ludwig has outdone himself again here, matching tone of the tone of his music to the instinctual sort of, I guess, like the haunting vibes of this movie in a lot of ways. I know, Nate, you had some thoughts about the music, so why don't you share some more?
Yeah, I just think it's you mentioned, Darcy, you picked right up on it with the word guttural. It's a word, and I think back to one of my favorite scores. This is kind of weird, but from a series called Yellow Jackets, where they did utilize a lot of that sort of choral chanting, and it does feel like, Justin, you used the word vibes. And I think that's the kind of the perfect way to describe this Ludwig score, because it really is more of a vibe than like a traditional, like, I think it's more ambient than any of his other scores. And I think the freakiest parts of this movie, his music helped to sort of incite that panic and that like primal hysteria that these soldiers are experiencing throughout this film. And I think his music played a big part in getting me to lean forward in my seat. A lot of times this movie's long, right? So you want to lean back, you want to relax, but as soon as that's freaky, like just sort of guttural, breathy, just sort of, you don't really know how to place it. Is that an instrument? Is that a voice? What is it? That's what really pulls you in those moments.
Yeah, I even liked the like two things with what you were talking about there. The layers of sound. I don't know if it was just me, but I heard some more contemporary sounds that were kind of weaved in. I don't know if that was purposeful. I don't know if I was just tripping, but like it could have been. But I feel like I
Were
feel
you
like
eating some lotus flowers, maybe?
No lotus flowers. But I feel like there was a mixture of old and new into the sound that was almost like, if you really listen, you hear it, right? But maybe I'm off on that. But to your point of adding more emotion and heightening the tension, we've seen this sort of collaboration from Nolan and other composers. Hans Zimmer with the Joker's theme, that violin
right off the beginning,
right?
bro.
Yep, right, absolutely. Ding 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 ding. Like that tension build. Oppenheimer had it as well with Ludwig, with the sort of lead up to the atomic bomb. There is a moment like that in this film, where we do have that tension build, and we're cutting it, and that's where he's really good at cutting these moments. Like with the music, it's just the tension's building. You're like, when is it gonna snap? When is it gonna break? And it just keeps going and going. And I think, again, it's like Ludwig has worked so well with Christopher Nolan over the years that he understands how to work with him in these moments and say, okay, I know what you're trying to go for here, so let's lean into this. I think it worked really well. Kind of going back with the music and the visuals, something I didn't mention is how refreshingly bold it was to see Nolan kind of step outside of his comfort zone into some more horror elements. Visually, we'll talk about it probably narratively, but I appreciated that. But that marriage with sound design, even in the moments when we are in the cave with the Cyclops, I think we hear Jarbold talking, like the way it's disguised, the way that sound design is made. It's haunting. It sits in your heart. It's like it hits you hard. Like it's crazy. So I know there's been a lot of people who have had issues, myself included. I know Nate has as well, with Nolan's sound design in some of his movies.
Yeah, I wanted to
But
ask, like,
the sound design was good. I liked
yeah,
it.
well, that's what I wanted to ask, because I didn't experience. I've seen reactions online of people being like, I couldn't understand anything anyone was saying, and I'm like, I didn't get that at all
Yeah.
this time around.
Yeah, I well, we haven't seen it in IMAX. IMAX obviously does deliver a different sound experience.
Yeah.
That said, like I heard everything. Like I think I heard more. Like there were so many layers to like I said, the music, even to the Cyclops' Polyphemus. I keep calling the Cyclops
Polyphemus, yeah.
Polyphemus voice was just, it had so many layers, and like, you know, there was just so much that was so well done with the sound design this time that I
Even the
genuinely
echoes in that cave in that
That's what
moment,
I'm
right?
saying.
Like
Yeah,
the way
yeah.
that the soldiers' voices are echoing off the walls. It didn't sound like, I didn't hear it and go, oh, I'm watching a movie. I heard it and felt like I was in a cave. And I think that's like, when we're talking about, again, the way the lighting can be natural to a fault at times, or at least in my personal experience, it felt like that. The sound was natural for all the right reasons.
I think one of the coolest things about the sound for me throughout the whole thing was, again, going back to the fact that this is a story about gods interacting with the realm of man in different ways and influencing men. We're talking about like that guttural, like the choral chanting and stuff like that. At times it was whispering where there are moments of tension. Like it helps feel like the gods are watching, and you can hear their almost distant chatter as they're providing commentary for this comedy of errors that's happening before them. Like I don't know, it was so cool. It was adding to this again, the world building, where it felt like gods could exist in this place, which is really neat.
Well, that's what I've always loved about the way, like, Nate kept bringing it up. Percy Jackson is the only way you've ever actually seen this version of Homer's Odyssey.
And the
Okay,
Simpsons.
sure, but the reality is that in many cases, and even in the myths, they might visualize the gods as a being and a person. What I liked about this movie is that there was none of that. It was literally about the elements, the things. I believe
There was at least one character, though, right?
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Like
With Athena.
Yes, for sure. There's a couple, but I just mean like the bigger gods. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Sure.
And also, I wonder,
We could have gotten a casting of Zeus in this movie, and it's so great.
right?
that
We
didn't,
could have gotten a
right?
casting of Zeus.
Yeah.
We could have got a casting of Poseidon, but instead of casting those bigger gods, they left it to this idea of the elements. You know what I mean? These things that were in the way of their journey home, and it hit hard because it amplified, they, like you said, Darcy, like amplifying the ocean sounds, or amplifying like the thunder and stuff to accentuate at specific points. It reminded you that the gods were watching, right, without having to actually put a physical person there.
Now, I will say, though, I did feel like the absence of gods does take away kind of some of the epic, because the gods do very heavily influence Odysseus, and we don't really see that as much as I would like. But that's just a different thing. So
okay, we'll talk about the story then. We'll save that for the story. Save that for the story. Yeah. Nick,
but I do
ahead.
like the with the absence of them in this movie. It did, and again, this might just be a factor of like the story in general, but I did like the idea of like just looking at these human beings and how they lived, and it was like, oh, we did something really good today, so that's why there's no storm. It's like, there might just not be a storm, but like that's how they experience their life. That's their beliefs, that they're, so I did enjoy that felt very grounded in that reality. And then we still did get some really, I think, interesting moments with Athena throughout the film.
Yeah, personifying Athena made sense for his journey.
For
Odysseus specifically, especially given, the significance of who she is in his story. So yeah, I think with that said, I think we can transition right into performances. We won't start with Zendaya as Athena. Let's talk about Odysseus. Let's kick things off talking about Matt Damon. Darcy, I'll throw it to you. What'd you feel about Matt?
He was definitely one of the strongest performances from this movie. I every time we return to Odysseus and his trials and his journey, or just hearing about people talk about him and seeing those stories come to life, you believed it. I believed every second of it. It was incredible. And again, the dialogue notwithstanding, sometimes it's bad. I don't think I had that issue at all with him. At least he was delivering everything so wholeheartedly and so believable. He is Odysseus to me.
Yeah. Matt Damon really, really worked for me in this movie. Like, I think the way that he's able to like get you to really quickly, feel his plight, if you will, right? I think he did such a good job of bringing that humanity to the character.
Mhm.
And you are, the way that he shows in his face, like just that furrowed brow of his, where you just see him, he's constantly calculating the risks and the weight of what he believes he has to do throughout this journey to get his men home. And I think just that authenticity was there that really made me like look at this man as a leader. And I think there were just so many times, like you said, Darcy, where the movie would cut away from him and cut away from that journey and that part of the story to other parts of this story. And I was like, no, please just let us stay with Odysseus. And I understand why we have to go see those other parts, because that's the movie and that's more story around his journey. But I found him so intriguing, and I loved how we were able to sort of get into his core beliefs and the difference in his thoughts of the difference of hunting and fighting. I thought was so well done. And I thought his line delivery in those moments of sort of giving us insight into who Odysseus is as a person and as a human was excellent. I think he carried the movie for me.
Yeah, he did. I think what I loved most about Matt Damon as Odysseus was he didn't play the character like an untouchable legend. He feels like a man.
Mhm.
He is a man who's exhausted and he's carrying the weight of everything he's been through. But there are moments where you see some charm and you're reminded of why he would be a good king. You know what I mean? And I think there's that component to his performance while also delivering something that feels vulnerable when the story calls for it, right? Like he just brings, as you said, like just a grounded humanity to the character that is obviously, legend. You know what I mean? He's part of a myth, right? So it's like that character could have been larger than life, but instead it felt very grounded and very real. And yeah, he carried the movie. Now the question I'm asking, and I'm going to kind of tap with all of these characters, because hey, this is Oscar buzz. This is Oscar bait. All of this is Oscar bait, right? So do you think Matt Damon will get nominated for an Oscar for this performance?
Yes.
I definitely see a nomination not going his way for sure.
Yeah.
I see that too. I definitely think that he's deserving of the nomination. I guess it'll be up to the Academy and who else is in the category to really distinguish if he's worth it. But hey, Tom Cruise is going to probably also be in that category for Digger. So we'll see. Okay, let's move on to Anne Hathaway, because she was like, I feel like as grounded and real as Odysseus was, Penelope felt almost more theatrical, but it never took me out. I don't know. Like there was an air of theatricality to Anne Hathaway's performance that felt fitting for this, but it never felt like it was so outside of the box that she was overacting. Am I crazy to say that? I'm not sure.
No, I think that's the strength of someone like Anne Hathaway. She has the ability to do that. She has the ability to deliver that like over the top, crazy, powerful, sobbing monologue. And at the same time, you sort of feel like, wow, this would fit perfectly on a stage. How does it fit in a movie? But at the same time, to your point, it never made me go, oh, I didn't enjoy that. I think it left most of the time her sequences, which I don't think she's given a ton to do in this movie. She's given a few moments that are really good because of her. But I think, for the most part, every single time we did cut away from her, I was pretty riveted from her performance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think she did a pretty good job. I mean, there were some times where, again, I think it's more the dialogue that was taking me out of it, not so much her performance, because no matter how much you overact, sometimes that dialogue will make that overacting stand out a bit more. But there are some times where it's phenomenal, memorable scenes where it's, again, those one-on-one emotional moments where you see the facade of this queen who's dealing with all her suitors kind of crumble, and the real Penelope shines through, the one who's missing her husband for 20 years type thing. So it's really cool to see that duality between like kind of the mask come on when the shutters open type thing. So that was a really cool aspect of her performance that I again remember, and it's stuck with me a day later at least.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Anne Hathaway, like, she completely had my attention every time she was on screen. She was like, Penelope was written with so much strength, and Hathaway balanced that beautifully. There are just moments where she just, like I was saying, she just leans into that theatricality. But because the story itself is sort of rooted in mythology, it never feels like it's out of place because of that. So it actually adds emotional weight to her performance. And you're absolutely right, Darcy. Like her best scenes are when she's acting off of people. Like her scene with Telemachus, her son, played by Tom Holland, as she's sort of breaking and crumbling. Like it was so powerful and it was so like riveting. I see that and I think she's going to be nominated for an Oscar, and that's the scene they're going to play. You know what I mean? Like for sure, that's
you can
know
pick
what I mean?
that scene right.
Right, because it's just so rooted in just deep emotion, and it's really beautiful what she put on for this. You know, like if anything, if you're looking at this and you're thinking, you know, it feels like a stage play to a degree, right? Because you know, just brought to life. Her role is like this balance between being a play but also feeling very grounded. I don't know, she did a really great job,
and very like emotional, not just from the standard sense of emotional of like sadness, but also like frustration and rage
absolutely.
At times, which was
even when she had to hide
so
it,
impressive.
like the way her eyes quivered or her lips like she nailed everything, and she is so good at what she does. She has taken lessons from Meryl Streep 100%. So
I'm sure.
I'm telling you, Devil Wears Prada 1 and 2. Let me tell you, they're probably
we all have though, if you think about it.
Sure. Let's move into talking about Tom Holland, and you know, after this we can kind of disband, and I'm sure there's a variety of people. There's a huge cast here, but let's talk about Telemachus, played by Tom Holland. Who wants to go first? I'll throw it to you, Darcy.
This is where the dialogue really stands out. I understand. Again, it's not from him per se, but just hearing mom and dad out of his mouth, it doesn't sound like a prince or someone who's trying to, you know, respect his father. He just sounds like a whiny kid. And it's hard to look away from that for the most of the movie. Towards the end, when he does step into the role of his own shoes and following his own destiny type thing, is where it really picks up for me. And I think we got some really cool stuff. Again, the scene with Anne Hathaway is incredible. And then later on, seeing him come back after going on his own journey throughout the movie, it's really cool seeing how he takes that character and almost makes him feel more like a man and less like a boy just after this 6-month journey or whatever it was type thing. It was really cool to see that.
Yeah, I think he felt a bit more tame than everyone else in terms of like just the level of what he was sort of given and also giving. I think the moments that you brought up, Darcy, are the moments that really did hit for me. I think there's a couple, like I think 2 moments or maybe 3 where there's tears in his eyes, and I'm like, Tom, you're nailing this. Like yes, absolutely. Like I was drawn in. I was completely on board. I think it was just everything in between of especially when it comes to him delivering that dialogue that did sort of just fall a little bit flat for me. And I you know, I guess it's just like, I don't know. I can't think of him as anyone but Spider-Man, but Peter Parker, unfortunately.
No,
I don't know.
I think he did a solid job.
Yeah.
In this performance as Telemachus. It's obvious though to him, just even out of the movie, to Tom Holland, how important this project was. Like someone did a supercut of all the ways Tom Holland's manifested his career. You know, talking about he wanted to play Spider-Man, he wanted to play Nathan Drake from Uncharted, and he wanted to work with Christopher Nolan, and Christopher Nolan called him in for this role. There are a few moments, like you said, like he stands out and his acting shines, and you see, wow, he is destined to be a great actor. He just needs more time to kind of find his footing, if you will. But there are some moments where his dialogue felt very rushed compared to the rest of the cast, and I don't know if that's simply the performance or the pacing of certain scenes, but it stood out to me. And you know, there is sincerity in his role, but the other part of it too, and this is kind of back to the IMAX of it all. These cameras can only shoot 3 minutes at a time, and they take 20 minutes to load. And so I think, and he you know, Christopher Nolan has said that, you know, that is one of the things that still has to be worked out with these cameras. because you're filming a scene. There's a real great emotional moment, and then it's like, cut. Okay, we need to reload. Everyone stay there for 20 minutes. He prepped everyone. He told everyone that this was going to be the process. I think he showed up with the mentality of trying to do the best he could within the time that he had when that camera was pointed on him. And I think that's what we got. And I think some of those cuts and some of those takes were the result of that, because as much of those cameras are really great to capture the beautiful pictures that they do, they can also be intimidating. It is a giant box. Go online, look at it. It is a giant, massive black box. It's a camera in an enclosure called the blimp that is keeping all of the sound. It's basically soundproof, so you don't hear the film reel, spooling through the camera, capturing. But you can only get 3 minutes of footage at a time on a reel, and that's like, for every actor, especially for people who are trying to find that moment, it might take some time, right? So, to be constantly resetted, after every 3 minutes, and I think it's about a 20-minute, if I read right, reload time for it. It instantly resets you. So that said, I feel like Tom Holland, his performance might have been the result of that as well. Just from a technical standpoint. So, because he did deliver. His character felt so much reminiscent of Elliot Page's character in Inception, sort of like this vessel character that we come to understand the world that we're in and all of the things, because that's how it kind of opens up with us learning more about Odysseus and the story of Troy and so on and so forth. But yeah, I think he did good, and I'm excited to see what he's going to do outside of Spider-Man inevitably soon. Because he's obviously done some movies outside of Spider-Man, but I think this is going to give him a great opportunity. I don't think he'll be nominated for an Oscar.
I don't think so. No.
Yeah, I don't think so.
I also don't think Robert Pattinson will be nominated for
not for this one, but maybe for Dune. We'll see.
Maybe for Dune, that would
maybe
be great.
For Dune 3.
Robert Pattinson was a roller coaster for me in this movie, where like I did not like him at all. Not for the reasons that I'm not supposed to like. He's if you know the story, he's not a great guy, I guess, and he is definitely an antagonist in this film. And you're not supposed to like the antagonist. Sure, that wasn't why I didn't like him. I didn't like him because he just didn't, something about the way he was talking, the way he was
hammy. He was super hammy.
And the thing is he was written kind of hammy.
Yes.
And then at a certain point, it started to come back around, where near the end of the movie, I was like, oh, now the hamminess is working. And then what did they do? Like a little cat pushing a little water thing off the table. They pushed it a little too far and it was too hammy again. And I was like, this is a roller coaster that I'm feeling. I don't necessarily know how much it was Robert Pattinson versus the direction he was given, the dialogue that was written. But yeah, I don't know. It was something about it just didn't fully work for me. I do like him as an antagonist. Like, I think he's a great antagonist. I think he can play a great antagonist. I just don't know if it worked fully for me in this movie.
Yeah. I mean, I think it worked for me again up until that end. I didn't mind him at all. I understood what they were going for. The hamminess was working with the character. He's a suitor going after this queen whose husband never returned. That's just scummy to begin with, but he's kind of the leader of these suitors. So the scummiest of scum. It worked for me. And then again, at the end of the movie, all the power and the again, that stuff they're supposed to not like about him was reduced to a joke that just took me right out of it. And I
people started laughing, and it was like, I don't know if you're supposed to be laughing.
It shouldn't be a laughed at moment.
No,
Greek
for
tragedy.
Sure.
It's not a comedy. Like,
like I do think though that Robert Pattinson continues to prove why he's one of the most interesting actors working today, because of just his sort of chameleonness, if you will. I enjoyed aspects of what he brought to the film, and like you said, Darcy, for the most part, I could see it. He's got an ego. He has something to prove. Like you said, Nate, if you know the story, you know who his character is, and it's more or less like, I think that's sort of in him. He's entitled. He feels entitled. He feels like he's deserving of something that he hasn't actually earned, right? And that's where that sort of that pretentious "I'm better than you" behavior kind of comes from. So for the most part, he worked for me even with his hamminess, and I didn't mind it all that much. But yes, in the final moments of this film where we see his character, it's not a good look for him. I would have much rather have him disappeared into the shadows, and then somehow come back. But yeah, it wasn't the greatest at the end there. And I think the thing that really sold it for me was just how much it took me up. But then when people started like chuckling at specific points of when he was talking, I'm like, I don't know if we're supposed to be laughing at this. You know what I mean? So I don't know. It's one of those moments, right? So unless Nolan has a weird humor and he's like, yeah, just keep cutting back to him. You know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean?
Could be. You never know.
It could be, right?
He's letting loose his top button, in that moment of his beautiful suit.
For sure. Yeah. It's just, but it was also just like, we're watching what's happening. He's reiterating what's happening. It's like we don't need him to reiterate what's happening. We're seeing what's happening.
Watching.
Yeah, exactly. We're watching it happen. So it felt a little bit silly. All that to say, go see the movie and you'll understand what we're talking about. Like I said, there's tons of people in this film.
Can I shout out one more? Do we get
I'll throw it to you guys. You guys can shout out whoever.
I just really want to shout out Samantha Morton as Cersei in this movie. I think she was unbelievable. I think she actually gives the best performance for as little as we get from her.
Yes, absolutely.
It's like 10 minutes that she's on the screen, and the way that her face is, like, she's able to display pain and burden and that feeling of being trapped in like a blessing and a curse at the same time. Like, it's just so cool how, again, just it's like it's a really great payoff. The how little we get of this woman in this movie and how much she actually gives to the sequence she's in. She's part of like probably one of my top 2 moments in this film. Like, she's just incredible.
Yeah, she definitely delivered. I think Samantha Morton is definitely destined to get an Oscar nom for Best Supporting Actress.
Let's go.
Yeah. This is one of the times throughout the movie where you feel the presence of the gods and the fantasy and the whimsy kind of behind the reality of it all, which is really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You mentioned Zendaya, like she was good. She was fine. There just wasn't enough of her, right?
Yeah.
And I guess that was by design. It was a fairly small role. I think her character ends up becoming interesting as we get towards the end and understanding how she helps Odysseus get home. But yeah, like I think again, she's another one of those very, very big names that are working in Hollywood right now. She's doing so much. For her to have a slice in this film and to play a god nonetheless is pretty awesome. And I think, again, she acted mysterious when she needed to be. I just wish that there was a little bit more of her potentially. Like I again, not fully knowing all of Homer's Odyssey, but just having a little bit more of her character.
I think I could have done like an actual scene. Like, it felt like there were moments throughout this movie. I think like a good actual like full scene of her, I think would have maybe added a little more. Yeah.
This is where, again, my issue with I understand wanting to take it more reality and have it more like, again, before we had science, we had stories, and that's how we tried to explain things happening in our world. And it was the gods, and we were making up all this stuff. Now we have science to explain it. We've always been curious about that, and I get that. But the gods interacting with men was always the coolest part of the mythology to me. The way they would talk, and they would be, maybe it wasn't so much physical one-to-one, but it would be receiving messages and oracles. And to me, the one god in this story that I would have focused on wouldn't have been Athena, because she's the one who's, yes, she's championing him for Odysseus to get home. But the one who's putting Odysseus through these trials really is Zeus. And then Hermes trying to help Odysseus while working for Zeus. It's just the conflict between gods is really cool. And I feel like while Zendaya is great and all of that, it's just a glimpse into what I wanted more from this movie, which was a bit more of that fantasy grounded in reality. Again, I understand wanting to take it away from fantasy and not make it so CGI and a spectacle in that regard, and make it more.
Well, like look at how they did Athena, though, right? Like Athena was just a person that appeared.
It was a tease, though. That's the thing. It wasn't enough. Like, she wasn't there guiding him, talking to him, whispering.
No, for sure.
The entire
I just
time.
mean how they represented her as a character. It was just a person. There was no like need for visual effects or anything.
That's how they usually happen.
Yeah, they represent
a stranger on the road, the beggar you let in on your front door type thing. It could be anyone, and that's the way they are. But they are still coming down. Whereas this one is like she wasn't really there, which is my thing. And again, we don't really get a performance from her, so just staring at Matt Damon. So I guess it was good, but it wasn't. I wanted more, like you're saying.
For sure. I'm going to shout out one last one, which
Luigi.
is John Leguizamo. I think he was another standout for me. He brings warmth, he brings loyalty, he brings strength, a very like toughness to him. I think that character was well rooted in sort of a parallel to that of Odysseus, right? In a lot of ways, he was loyal to him, and I really did appreciate seeing John Leguizamo in this film.
Does he get a nomination?
He could. I could
Best
see him getting a
Supporting?
best supporting.
That'd be awesome.
I could see him definitely getting a best supporting, and Matt and Anne getting best acting for actor and actress. So but yeah, that's it. Like again, there's so many people in this film. John Barenthal was good. Even with his like sort of like hey, yo kind of voice.
He did kind of just feel like John Barenthal.
But going back to Matt Damon. Matt Damon felt like Matt Damon.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like, do you know what I mean? Like it was just like and I think that was what helped bring all of this down to an accessible piece of film, right? That didn't feel like it was talking down to you, but it was kind of bringing you into the world in a more honest way.
Yeah. Elliot Page has a great moment in this
Elliot
movie
Page
as
was a
well.
great cameo.
Amish Patel was fantastic to follow too.
Amish Patel was great. Mia Goth was very underutilized. I think.
Yeah,
she was there.
She was there. I didn't realize it was her until like halfway through the movie, though.
Yeah,
right. Like there was. I don't think she had like a real scene. This is the thing about Nolan films now is that the cast is so huge, and like really, like Charlize Theron's in this film. Like there's just so many people that have either surprisingly more important roles, but smaller in size. And then there's other people that just have like the like very minimal like role, like a Mia Goth, you know what I mean, right? Or Samantha Morton, who was like small role, but she did a lot with that, right? Like she delivered and and it lived with you.
Or it even kind of felt like I enjoyed Corey Hawkins as Polybus. Polybus, am I pronouncing that right, Darcy?
Yep.
Polybus more than Robert Pattinson. Like they were kind of the two, guys, right?
Sure.
But like there were moments where I was just like I thought he really did work in throughout the movie, right? More than Robert for me, but
and Benny Safdie and Lupita Nyong'o, obviously big names, small roles, right? And they still had a presence, and what they did with what they were given with, that's why you bring these big names in, is because even if the role is small, they're going to do a lot with it. At least you would hope, right? So I would say that that most of the cast was able to bring that, right? So, but yeah, okay. Well, with that out of the way, let's get into story. I know we've been kind of dancing around some of like I guess things that we would have wanted more from it. Darcy, I'm going to throw it to you because you've been kind of speaking about it like through each of the different little parts that we've talked about. So why don't you kick things off for story?
Yeah. Again, when we first saw the Odyssey by Christopher Nolan was going to be coming out, I was really excited to see Nolan stepping into this larger than life world with gods and magic and men and all this stuff and a great war to tell a story about. And I was really excited to see what he's going to do with it. And I understand the wanting to take it and make grounding and make it more about reality and how we would perceive these things we can't explain type thing. But taking so much of that, the mythos, the gods and the fun out of it, it just leaves it to be feeling very bland and very rote. Again, this is the hero's journey, or one of the stories that inspired the hero's journey that we love to watch. We've repeated that story so many times since the Odyssey, the Iliad, any epic follows the same beats, and these beats happening in this movie just feel rote and they're not new or reinvented in any way. It's almost like this is the most traditional form of storytelling that Nolan's done, because he's taken so much of the fun, if you will, out of the mythos. And that's where this story loses it for me a bit, because again, the gods interacting with men is what makes me want to maybe fall in love with Greek mythology. So removing the gods so much takes some of that, my love, away from it, I guess.
Yeah, I know. It makes sense. That's, as someone who appreciates Greek mythology, I can appreciate what you're saying. Nate, how about for yourself?
Yeah, I think if you're really familiar with this movie, or sorry, with this story rather, then you're going to be okay jumping into this movie like Darcy was. I do think if you're not and you've only watched The Simpsons or Percy Jackson, the movie doesn't hold your hand at all. And at the beginning of this movie, I felt like I was plopped into the middle of a Game of Thrones spin-off series that I hadn't started watching from the beginning, just because their names, who's this, whose son is this, whose brother is this. Obviously, that
it was more clear than Game with R.R. Martin. There's no like Rhaena and Rhaenyra. That's
true. At least we don't have too many. I mean, there's quite a few something but I think I was just so focused on Odysseus in this movie that I didn't personally mind not feeling as connected to everyone else in the film. And I think, I think that's a good and a bad thing about this movie. I think if you stay hyper focused on Odysseus, I think you'll enjoy the movie. I think there's a lot of messiness around him. I think the pace is going to hurt this movie quite a bit. I know we all were checking our watch quite a few times. I didn't mind the modern dialogue. I think it made it, like you were saying, Justin, more palatable for audiences, and I didn't think it felt inauthentic in the way that I felt like something like Gladiator 2 or even like another 3-hour epic. I'm looking at you, Avatar: Fire and Ash, of the bro of it all. Like it never got that bad, and I was very grateful for that. I just think that there's something so romantic and poetic in the way that the movie delivered its storytelling through stories described by characters on these screens, like you described, Darcy. Like, that's what this is all about. That's where these myths come from. It's passed down from person to person. And I love the way that we see Odysseus go on this journey with his men. They experience a massive victory, and then they go through all these horrific experiences. And what affects him more than any of those awful moments is the first decision that he made earlier in the film and in the story. And I get that that's just the story of the Odyssey. I understand that's not something that Nolan is holistically, doing new. I just think it's the way that the movie contextualized it and drew that out of the character of Odysseus. That's what really made me feel a lot by the end of the movie, to really get me in those like hell yeah moments. Like, there were some crowd pleasing moments in this movie, and I think a lot of it came for me, but there were a lot of moments. I mean, people were laughing and people were having a good time.
Oh, for sure. People chuckled, but nobody like, hell yeah. Like there was
I guarantee there was a few. We were far up in that theater. I guarantee there was at least 4 more people. But I just think, I think everything around Odysseus did feel lesser than, and you named all these incredible people in the cast, Justin, and for that side of the story, it shouldn't have felt that way. Or maybe I shouldn't have felt, you know what I mean? Like I didn't feel like that felt as great to watch as Odysseus' plot, but I don't know, unbalanced.
So like to have all of those, so are you saying to have all of these other characters or actors was unnecessary? It should have just been more about him?
I'm just saying the movie didn't feel like those parts of the movie for me didn't work as well. And I think there's something in how they're written and how the pacing was done that does a disservice to the maybe we could have gotten 4 more moments of incredible Anne Hathaway, right? Maybe we could have gotten more moments of incredible Tom Holland, right? It wasn't structured that way.
Sure. Yeah. We could have maybe had some better moments for Tom Holland, but I feel like the moments we had with Penelope, everything worked for those characters, I think, based on how it was structured. For me, like, the story is always the biggest piece for a Nolan film. Sure. The how it looks, shot on IMAX, all that stuff. That's the stuff that we know Nolan for, but he is a storyteller. This man he has a degree in English. Right? Like, he is an English major. He is a writer. It makes sense that he would want to take one of the oldest myths and stories and want to adapt it for a modern age. And I think what I found most interesting about the Odyssey is that it feels like Christopher Nolan is pushing himself into new territory to a certain degree. You can still recognize all the trademarks, but he's still applying them to one of the oldest stories that's ever been told. And rather than just simply adapting Homer's Odyssey, he's trying to find a modern cinematic language for it. And we were talking about it. Like, it makes sense why he would keep the dialogue accessible. Instead of trying to recreate historically accurate language, the film speaks in a way that's let's modern audiences connect with these characters, and let's understand their motives and their intentions. It never feels like you're watching a history lesson. It feels like you're watching a timeless story. And I love that Nolan was still able to bring in his Nolan style non-linear storytelling with this one, and it's probably one of the smartest adaptation choices in this film. You know, rather than just following Odysseus's journey just like as a straight line, we're constantly moving between different points in time, and we're reliving his experience alongside him while also seeing what's happening back in Ithaca. Like it creates this tension because we're not just wondering how he'll survive. We're constantly reminded of what he's trying to return to, right? So to mix that narratively, I think it was well done. But that said, I don't think every creative decision lands. You know, there's first two acts they struggle with pacing 100%. You know, the film really just it's trying to. There's just some sections that feel incredibly quick, while others feel they like linger longer, and you know, it just makes the rhythm of the film feel uneven early on, and just like hard to kind of get into.
I was going to say just the we're supposed to be believing the fact that this story took place over 20 years, or at least 10 years after the Trojan War, his journey home, and the cutting back and forth so much makes the time seem so much shorter because we're spending so much time at Ithaca, which is a small window at the end of those 10 years, whereas the rest of the story happens over the 10 years leading up to it. It's all over the place, and it's hard to understand how long we're spending at times because of that. Like it's weird.
Absolutely. And I think that is probably one of those creative decisions. I know he doesn't usually do this. He has done it periodically, or, you know, I think in Dunkirk, he did like air, sea, like he established each of the story. I think we could have had something like
a bit more of like,
or just
timeline.
Like it didn't need to exactly, but it didn't need to be like 10, like what the year was. It could have been 10 years after or 5 years after, you know what I mean? Like, and we know what the point of after is. It's Troy. Right. So it's, I think even having a clever way of establishing could have been even more accessible in allowing people to kind of really hone in on the timeline, especially when they get out and of the hold of the cave of the Cyclops. But for me, everything comes down to the third act, like you were saying, Nate. Like once the emotional pieces begin falling into place, like the film just really finds its footing. And that's where Nolan's ambition, the performances, all the themes just start to align. Everything is just clicking, and it delivers some of the like movie's strongest moments, like that the final moments between Odysseus and Penelope was they're talking. It's so well done. But more than anything, I admire how ambitious this film is. This doesn't feel like Nolan repeating himself. It feels like a filmmaker challenging himself both visually and narratively, even when not every risk fully paid off. I'd much rather watch a director take big creative swings than play it safe. And I don't think he played it safe. I think that's what makes the Odyssey such a fascinating film to talk about, is that it doesn't feel overly safe, right? Even though I get what you're saying in terms of not wanting to like including the gods feels like it's a safe route to not include them. I think just narratively structured how he kind of mixes and what he's focusing on to really hone in on Odysseus' journey and just this idea of the burden of war. I think that's it. This whole mythic massive adventure is really about a very human personal moment, right? And I think that's what he does best. Like if we think about Interstellar, right? It's all about love.
Murph.
Oh God, it's so loud. So loud. That scared me. Murph. Okay, well, with that said, I think we've talked in great lengths about this film. I think it's time that we get to our final thoughts and our rating. I'd also like to hear, did this movie live up to the hype? And what was your score out of 1 to 5 Lotus Leaves?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it did not live up to the hype for me. Unfortunately, I came out of this with very middling thoughts. Again, I thought it looked incredible. The sound design was fantastic. A lot of the performances really landed for me. Just the dialogue and choices with the story and pacing really took me out of it and had me again checking my watch a few times, was waiting for to get to that end. That end is incredible, but the slog it takes to get there isn't the most enjoyable. And while it's good to look at, there are some glaring mistakes. Again, my biggest thing with the dialogue is for someone who's never met their father or their dad, and he's this great king, and as you hear these mysteries, like these legends about him, I wouldn't be calling him dad. I don't know the guy. There's no relation there. That's a father thing at all. And the dad thing just took me out of it. And hearing a mom, it too dumbing down. I guess that's where it was like. I understand making it more accessible, but this took it too far, and just felt like it was reducing it to just a very simple story, which is weird considering how epic the story is in proportion. So yeah, I'll be giving this one, unfortunately, 3 out of 5 lotus leaves.
Damn. Did not see that one.
Yeah, no, it was very middling. That's all it was for me, man.
This coming from the mythology guy too. Wow. Okay, Nate, come on. What's your score? And did it live up to the hype for you?
It did not live up to my hype of 8, but it really didn't come down by much. I think I'm at a 7.5 for the hype scale that I came out of. I feel like I ebb and flow with these like epic Nolan movies. Like I think when Oppenheimer came out, it was like everyone was like, "You're crazy for not absolutely adoring it." And I think I respected Oppenheimer a lot after that first watch, and then seeing it in IMAX the second time, I think I enjoyed it a lot more. But even watching it in IMAX, it still felt less accessible to me than this movie. I think aside from the length and the pacing, like we're bringing up, I think there are parts of this movie that really did feel accessible to me, really drew me into the plight of the leader that is Odysseus. The music is haunting when it needs to be. The shots are massive, and to know the craft behind them, I think makes them even more impressive. And I think the cast gave everywhere from like serviceable to excellent performances, with moments from Matt Damon and Hathaway and Samantha Morton specifically that will stay with me as some of the great Nolan film performances. I think the movie had way more crowd pleasing moments than I was expecting, and I got excited. I mean, I think there were just some great fist pumping moments in this movie, and I certainly can't say this cracked my top 5 of Nolan's 13 films. But it's definitely not at the bottom. I enjoyed myself. I think Nolan did a good job of capturing Odysseus' story and made that story great on screen. And so I'm happy to give Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey 4 out of 5 lotus leaves.
Very good. Yeah, I think this lived up to the hype. I think I'm going to say this part, but once I see it in IMAX, it might even elevate a little bit more. But I will say, in terms of like narrative and story and execution, yeah, it lived up to the hype for me. This film isn't perfect. This isn't Homer's Odyssey, though. This is Nolan's Odyssey, and it's his interpretation of one of the greatest stories ever told, filtered through the filmmaking style that's defined his career. You can see him challenging himself, not just visually, but as a storyteller, to find a way to adapt what makes sense and what works for his version of the story that he's wanting to tell. And there are moments where those ambitions don't fully come together, but I never stopped appreciating the fact that he was taking the risk in a lot of ways. And I think, like the myth itself, the story is it's filled with adventure, it's filled with horrors, hard-earned lessons about the burdens of war and just the meaning of home and the cost of the choices we make. Like, Nolan embraces those timeless ideas while finding his own cinematic language to tell it through his perspective as a filmmaker, which I genuinely appreciated. And I'm actually glad that my first experience was in 70 mil rather than the IMAX 70 mil. As incredible as I know that presentation would actually be, watching it in 70 actually allowed me to stay more focused on the story, the characters, and Nolan's interpretation of the myth without being overwhelmed by the spectacle. Like, everyone's screaming, go see this in IMAX. And of course you should go see this in IMAX, see it on the biggest screen possible. But there's no one that's really been talking about maybe some of the other things that, like, we've talked about, where there might have been, some narrative clunky narrative choices or some things that didn't necessarily work. But that said, now that I've experienced the film, I cannot wait to see this film in IMAX 70 mil and fully take it in on the scale of what Nolan and his team actually accomplished. But yeah, I walked out of the theater conflicted, but after sitting with it and thinking about, just like you said, Nate, Odysseus's story, it's that really I kept coming back to, and his journey, and just the final moments of his realization that I think really kind of brought it all together for me. I think it's this epic mythic story that's really just focusing on the man of the story in a lot of ways, and I think that's actually really, really smart. But yeah, like you said, it may not reach the heights of some of my favorite Nolan films, but it's ambitious, it's thoughtful, it's epic. It's from a filmmaker who just I love and continues to challenge the audiences to kind of experience his films in very unique ways. And I think it's the kind of filmmaking I want to support and I love to support. So yeah, I'm giving it 4 out of 5 lotus leaves. All right. Well, we did it, guys. We made it home.
Back. We're all still alive.
We're all still alive. There's 3 of us. Thank God.
Thank the God.
Jeez, I thought Nate would have gotten eaten by that Cyclops. Jeez,
dude. Maybe we all actually did. Maybe we're just in Hades right now.
We wouldn't be hanging out and talking to each other because we wouldn't be able to remember much.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know how it works.
Clearly,
I didn't got into that part of Percy Jackson yet. I didn't get
into that part of Jackson. Well, we hope you enjoyed this spoiler-free review for Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey. Again, a huge thanks to Universal Pictures Canada for inviting us out early to see the movie for review. As I mentioned, the movie is in theaters July 17th, 2026. That's this Friday. So go see it. Go see it however you can. IMAX screens are pretty scarce. If you're like us and the internet failed you and you were not able to get tickets for the IMAX 70 mil, well, you'll be waiting a long time because we're not seeing this until the middle of August, which is fine. Let the Nolan bros go see it like 12 times and then we'll be good. Go into a nice quiet theater, sit dead center, just be wrapped in all of that IMAX goodness. But yeah, go see it in any format. The 70 mil was great. It was sharp. It was clear, absolutely stunning. But yeah, that's it. If you want to write in and let us know your thoughts on the Odyssey, how you saw it, what your favorite moment was, maybe we're totally wrong about anything and everything that we've talked about. Hey, we would love to hear from you. You can reach us at wearegeekcentric@gmail.com. That's wearegeekcentric@gmail.com. You can also find us on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, at GeekcentricYT, or on Instagram and TikTok at We Are Geekcentric. Keep in mind, we have a ton of other episodes available now on podcast feeds for you to enjoy, like our spoiler-filled review for 007 First Light. Darcy and Nate finished that game up and decided to sit down and, compare their scores and their bullets, and
you played a video game.
Tell me you haven't played the game without telling me you haven't played the
game. Wow. We also have our spoiler-free review. Well, it's not really a spoiler-free review if you've already seen the movie, but for Disney's Moana. We also have our spoiler-filled conversation for DC Studios' Supergirl, and our spoiler-free review for X-Men 97 Season 2, Episodes 1 to 4. Hey, if you're not watching that show and you need to listen to that episode, it's there for you, but what are you doing? Seriously, pick up the remote and start watching X-Men 97. We also have a ton of great interviews available on podcast feed and on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/geekcentric. Our latest interview, Behind the Geeks, with the cast and creators of Disney Pixar's Hoppers, to celebrate Disney and Pixar's Hoppers being available to stream on Disney Plus. Well, we had the opportunity to talk to director Daniel Chung and producer Nicole Paradis-Grindle, as well as Piper Curta, who plays Mabel, the voice of Mabel, and Bobby Moynihan, who is King George.
Bobby Moynihan returning to the Geekcentric podcast.
Returning.
He was so happy the first time.
Yeah, he was so happy the first time. Now he had a great time the second time. But yes, thank you for joining us on the Geekcentric podcast. If you enjoy this episode, make sure to subscribe to us wherever you listen to podcasts. And hey, you know what? If you really love us, feel free to leave us a rating. It really helps us support the show because we are Geekcentric and you can be too. Nate, Darcy, thank you for joining me for this spoiler-free review. And as we say,
love ya.
Laters.
Peace.